few minutes late this morning. Dala Dhava Jebe Dran Hovar Jebe Gek Dharba Dan Tamche Kembe Bardu Chopra Jeba Tam Jege Se Jebe Manam Kadang Yampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dan Den Tunga Tander Nerdu Lana Mepayang Dabara Zobe Chanchu Rinpoche Dobra Jan Dala Dhoma Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ge Garbada Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Dham Jege Su Jebe Manam Kadam Yampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Tunga Dandre Nerdu Lana Mebhayang Dabra Zobe Chanchu Rinpoche Tobra Jan Dala Dhava Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ge Tarbada Tam Je Kempe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tham Jege Su Jebe Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Tunga Dandre Nerdu Lana Mepayang Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpoche Dobra Jan Jebe Sama Keki Bardu Lunga Yesum Kewa Labu Mashi Bardu Lunga Yesum Kewa Labu Drene Sunte Nema Tsam Ta Samji Bardu Lunga Yesum Kewa Labu Sanje Chodan Soge Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dane Kyamsu Che Dage Jenso Kebe Sonam Ke Drola Penche Sanje Drubra Sanje Chodan Soge Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dane Kyamsu Che Dage Jenso Kebe Sonam Ke Drola Penche Sanje Drubra Sanje Jodan Soge Jonam La Chanchu Bardu Dhane Kyabsu Je Dage Jinsu Kipe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sanje Drupro Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dam Dewe Kindan Tempra Kirchi Tung Yao Tang Tung Yao Ki Kyudan Trawa Kirchi Tung Yao Mepe Dewa Dhammi Trawa Kirchi Niring Chadang Nidang Trawa Tang Yang La Nepra Kirchi Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Deva Dang Dewe Kindan Tempra Kirchi Tung Yao Tang Tung Yao Ki Kyudan Trawa Kirchi Tung Yao Mepe Dewa Dhammi Trawa Kirchi Niring Chadang Nidang Trawe Tang Yang La Nepra Kirchi Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Kindan Tempra Kirchi Tung Yao Tang Tung Yao Ki Gyudan Dewa Kirchi Tung Yao Mepe Dewa Dhammi Dewa Kirchi Niring Chadang Nidang Trawe Tang Yang La Nepra Kirchi. Now we will do the 7-branch puja in English, Chinese, Spanish, in the different interpretation room. In all the world worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind by the power of this aspiration to noble deeds. All conquerors appear vividly in my mind with as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands. I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharmadhatu as completely filled with you conquerors. In this way, with infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you. Come to bliss with the best flowers and best garland, best music, ointments and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense. I offer to you conquerors with excellent garments and best fragrances and sandalwood powder, heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged. I offer to you conquerors these vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors. With the power of conviction in noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddha, solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons there are atoms in the world for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching. I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. Now the mandala offering and the requesting of the teachings. 我所是不给知识没多长，知道人心念天看法的三界心都没得破瓦也诸个南大心拉给我说，故松用所拉没做南了，只能上顺的心你给主大路龙就能是用些了。拉美就跟我的走的说，叫做我当最近上班当其实依然苦心做我也。给我从这大给介绍吧，他们接受被长久接我过的那把大给你人那mandala prate jaso hawai semche namki sambada doye jidra jidarva jejun tumon tebaye jogi kolo kordu so Doje Jangwa Dele Naro Damami Dabu Padu Jitin Konkaden Sunden Zavela Mesham Sadula Mayidam Jugyong Soba Desu Dogi Jinjil Gabenge Domedam Rabedo Sonyong La Kenzo Mengawa Dorjin Chang Pa Jitin Gumbo Shaba Dudu Tatu Sangi Kyole Me Jinjil Loshi Tuje Jin Gemma Basani Gansen Dode Dobra Jinjil Oje Yijin Chansan Pema Gesa Dompola Yasa Jogi Mutumne 那么就那些学生活动看到我们风格给给这三套的给真正的就是活动那么是的我们就给一个活动 ne du sun san jin kun jin gong wen ni ran san jun kun yung sun don ze ba za we la me sha la so wa. So we continue in the chapter on carefulness. The last time we met, we have arrived at verse 27. We completed verse 27. So today then we'll start on verse 28. This next section goes from 28 to 35. So let us read these verses in their respective languages in the different rooms. Anger, lust, these enemies of mine are limbless and devoid of faculties. They have no bravery, no cleverness. How then have they reduced me to such slavery? They dwell within my mind and at their pleasure injure me. All this I suffer meekly, unresenting. Thus my abject patience all displaced. If all the gods and demigods besides together came against me as my foes, they would be powerless to throw me down to fires of hell of unrelenting pain. And yet the mighty fiend of my afflictions flings me in an instant headlong down to where the mighty Lord of mountains would be burned, its very ashes all consumed. O my enemy, afflictive passion, endless and beginningless companion, no other enemy indeed is able to endure so long. All other foes that I appease and wait upon will show me favors, give me every aid, but should I serve my dark, defiled emotions, they will only harm me, draw me down to grief. If thus my ancient and unceasing foes, the wellspring only of my growing pain, can lodge so safe within my heart, how can I live so blithe and fearless in this wheel of life? And if the jail guards of the prisons of samsara, the butchers and tormentors of infernal realms all lurk within me in the web of craving, what joy can ever be my destiny? One moment. See if I can find Antonia. Yeah. So in this section, Shantideva, points out, reminds us of the power of kleshas, of afflictive emotions. So basically, overall, here, he's saying we have misplaced our patience. Why is it that we are so patient, with regards to the afflictive emotions, even like behaving as if the afflictive emotions are our, longtime friends, and yet, so unable to endure. And patience here is a sense of not so much like the way we use the word patience these days, but patience here in the sense of like being able to bear So sometimes in English, this word kashanti in Sanskrit is translated as to forbear, to be able to bear, to be able to tolerate, to be able to be patient with, right, in that sense. So he says, like we have misplaced our patience. We can endure, we can forbear the kleshas, but when it comes to the work of defeating kleshas, some small setback, we give up. We give up patience. We give up forbearance. Or we say, oh, no, this is too hard. I mean, we read about, Buddha Shakyamuni when he was a Bodhisattva, all the hardships that he went through. We read about like stories of great masters and the difficulties that they went through. And, when we're reading those stories, often we're like, oh, wow, this is so amazing. This is so great, But then we don't ever really take those things to heart. So then we run into some difficulties in our attempts to get rid of the kleshas. Then we give up, slight setback, we give up. We do, I myself included, some difficulties arise. It's like, oh, no. And if that's where we are, we should then, see that, understand that this is where we are. That means, for the most part, dharma, we are pursuing dharma, not really to uproot the kleshas. Well, we're pursuing dharma because it's interesting. We're pursuing dharma because it's entertaining. We're pursuing dharma because it seems sophisticated. So this is all about kind of further serving the 8 worldly concerns. I dare say, never before have we had such easy and constant access to the Dharma. Even during the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, I dare say that. Because even the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, there were no recordings, It's not like, oh, Buddha Shakyamuni is teaching from 7 to 8 a.m. And then, he also manifests in another place teaching. And in that other place where he's teaching, someone has recorded. So then at 8 a.m., I'm going to listen to, what he taught at the other place, manifesting another body, right? So even when Buddha Shakyamuni was around, there is not this much access we have right now to Dharma. But do we have people attaining realization the way that Buddha Shakyamuni was around?
Do we have people attaining realization at the rate of when Milarepa was going through the hardships, when Naropa was going through the hardships? No. So we have to think about that, you know. Dharma has become so easily available, maybe over easily available. So what comes easy goes easy. We retain nothing. But now here, you know, we're like, oh, I don't know. I don't like using Zoom. So it's like, no, I don't want to. Oh, the internet is unstable. No, I'm going to turn it off. This is too much. Then those who play the teacher's role, you know, doing everything to attract people to come directly and indirectly. Oh, sending reminders. Oh, please come. Oh, we meet this time. Oh, this is free. Oh, this is that. That is that. You know, and in the end, you know, do we have people actually achieving realizations? I'm not so sure, you know. Which is to say, we have to put in the effort. Yeah. We really have to put in the effort, take to heart, and apply the teachings. Try to understand why working with difficulties that arise, challenges that arise when we are doing this work of defeating the kleshas is necessary. We have to be willing to endure difficulties and hardships. We're not saying, you know, difficulties and hardships is required. So this is a slight, seemingly slight difference, but actually major. The understanding is very different. We're not saying to achieve realization, hardships and difficulties is required. What is required is our willingness and ability to endure hardships and challenges. Our willingness. There is one recent teacher, Tibetan teacher, who lived in Nepal area, Chadar Rinpoche. Part of Chadar Rinpoche's reputation is that he doesn't accept that many people as his students. Even the most famous, highest lamas with titles and this holiness, that holiness, famously he's like, I no, that's okay. People want to meet him, want to see him. He's like, no, that's okay. He says, I don't have anything to really add to your development, and I don't need anything from you. So let's not waste time. So he famously will not meet with people. So there are lots of stories of also how great, like a practitioner, his great realizations. So some of the stories that I've heard, like if Westerners, would go try to see him, and if they manage to actually go and see him and say, "Oh, can you be my teacher?" He will say things like, "Come back after you have learned Tibetan. Otherwise, waste of time." So again, Chadar Rinpoche is not saying like learning Tibetan is a must. But he is saying, are you willing? Are you willing to go through the hardship of learning Tibetan? If you're really serious about the Dharma. And since I only speak Tibetan, and if you really want to understand directly from me, you go learn Tibetan. So most people leave. Like, oh, no, not possible. And then he says, okay, well, in that case, don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. Then other cases, again, when people come to him and say, oh, Rinpoche, you're so great, this and that, can you teach me? Can I be your student? And then he also said, famously, he said, I can accept you as a student. In this case, maybe he did not say learn Tibetan. He said, on one condition, you do not make any plans that is to be carried out more than 3 months. Yeah. So you can plan about tomorrow, you can plan about next week, you can plan about next month, you can plan about 3 months, or rather, 2 months and 29 days. But if you make any plans for the 3rd month onwards, you have disqualified yourself from being a student. Can you do that? Most people cannot. Most people leave. Most people, if they came to Nepal, they will say, oh, in 4 months, I'm going home. I have a ticket, that I'm flying home. Well, that's a plan. He said, no, then forget it. So let's look at verse 28. So in verse 28, Shantideva says, these afflictive emotions, who are the real enemies, such as anger and lust, they don't even have hands or legs, or eyes or ears, and they don't have, cleverness or bravery. But yet, when they turn up, I become like their slave. I do everything that they order me around to do. So, in a poetic way, he says, and then 29, he says, and they've even moved in, moved into my mental real estate, my palace, I've even like invited them in, and they harm me, they torture me at their pleasure. And yet, instead of evicting them, instead of kicking them out, I endure them. I say, oh yes, it's okay, we can coexist. And he says, this kind of generosity, so to say, this kind of patience, this is misplaced. This is really foolish. So mainly because we don't recognize, that they are in fact our enemies. First of all, they are not us. That's the first thing that we often forget. These afflictive emotions, they are not us. They are not part of us because it never feels relaxed. It never feels natural when they are around. When was the last time when you have afflictive emotions, taking over and you feel, this is so good, I am really enjoying this? Never. So that means they're not our nature. That's why we never enjoy them. We never enjoy them. Some of you might say, well, oh no, I enjoy getting angry. But not when you were angry. Maybe afterwards, and you see maybe by getting angry, some of your limited goals got achieved. Then afterwards you say, oh yeah, that was good. But when you're taken over by anger, you never go, oh, this is so good. And then like all your muscles are at ease and relaxed. No. So first of all, these kleshas, they're not you. And secondly, not only that they're not you, but they are enemies. They are robbers that you have allowed to stay in your house. And they rob you blind. They steal from you. They harm you. They torture you. But instead, we walk around, parading to our neighbors. Look how much afflictive emotions I have. Because the way of the world admires people wearing their afflictive emotions. And they're like, yes, very good. This is the way of samsara, which means confused existence. So 30 to 31, Shantideva says, even if all the worldly gods and demigods, all the spirits, even if they were all to rise up against me as my enemies, yeah, he says, even with that, all they can do is to take my life, at most, this life, right? But the true enemies, the afflictive emotions, because of them, I can end up in the unrelenting hell, which is Avicii, the deepest hell that the Buddha described that exists in the hell realms. Is unrelenting, or another translation is non-stop, non-stop suffering. The deepest Avicii hell, it says, whereas all my ordinary enemies can do at most is to take this life. But the afflictive emotions can land me lifetime after lifetime in the hell realms. So 31, it says, this mighty fiend, not friend, okay? In English, friend and fiend, not friend, mighty fiend, this terrible demon of afflictive emotions. It will fling me, it will like throw me into the hell realms, where the fires are so hot that even the Lord of Mountains, Mount Meru, like the cosmic mountain, if it was thrown into these hell realms, it will burn up, including the ashes will also be burnt. It's that hot. So it says, how dangerous these kleshas are. So 28 and 29, just to point out, Shantideva is emphasizing how powerless, from one perspective, the kleshas are. 30 and 31st, he is showing us how powerful they are from another perspective. And 32 and 33, he's showing us how sneaky, how persistent, how much patience the kleshas have towards us. That means, they're not so easily, they don't give up so easily. So they're counting on us giving up easily. So it says 32, oh, my enemy, afflictive passion, this endless and beginningless companion, following us like a shadow. It says, no other enemy, have remained with me for so long. And then, also with the other enemies, with the ordinary enemies, if I'm nice to them, eventually they don't harm me because I have become friends with them. As they say, like the way to turn an enemy, to destroy an enemy, is to turn that enemy into a friend. And I think all ordinary enemies, you can do that. There's the possibility of doing that. But by definition, the afflictive emotions, if we serve them in any way, they will only harm us. They will only cause suffering. Now, of course, later on in another context, it is said that you can become friends with the kleshas, but that's at a different level of practice. Well, we should not confuse these two different perspectives. And this perspective is very important, especially as beginners, to recognize the faults that are afflictive emotions, to really see them for what they are. 34 says, if these relentless ancient enemies, the very source of my pain, my suffering, if they can, kind of like take up real estate in my heart and my mind, how can I live as if there's nothing wrong? Everything is fine. And these jail guards of the prison of samsara, these butchers, these tormentors, on verse 35, they all are lingering around in my house, and yet, I pretend as if, business as usual, everything is fine, no problem. It's like if you have found, like some poisonous snakes in your house, for me, don't even need to be poisonous. If there's a snake, if I found a snake inside my house, if I can't get it out, I'm going to leave and check into a hotel. No way, like I'm really terrified of snakes, even though most snakes are harmless, but never mind, So if we really see that there's like these afflictive emotions living in here, how can we say, oh, let's go have fun, let's party? No, the first thing is, let's get rid of these enemies. So Shantideva says, we really need to not have misplaced patience, misplaced sense of like endurance. Oh, I can withstand this. He says, no. You give them 1 inch, they will take 1 foot. You give them 1 foot, they will take 1 yard. If you give them 1 yard, they will take a mile. So before we take a break, let's see if there are any questions, either from today or from the last couple of meetings. We've not had a chance to take some questions or comments.
Dr. La, I have a point of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we say afflictions harm us, I think it's easy to think in terms of, really negative stuff like anger and jealousy and stuff like that. But also attachment also harms us. I think sometimes we kind of misinterpret emotional high as being happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I think you say like, oh no, no one loves affliction, but I think that kind of misinterpretation kind of happens, and yeah.
Yes, so
It's difficult to see that that kind of emotional highs also harm us.
Yes. So I'll briefly repeat. So it's a comment on how it's often easy to see the clearly kind of kleshas to be harmful, like jealousy and impatience and aggression and things like that. But then like emotional highs, like things that seem like they are, friendly, like you get very excited or you get very happy, that what about those, And yes, of course. Now, if you're very happy, that mental state of very happy itself is not a klesha. Okay, so that's not a klesha. But lurking behind that, often, almost you could say built into that, is a hook, which is being entangled into that experience and wanting that experience to never go away. But because all experiences are temporary, of course it's going to go away. Then when it goes away, then dukkha turns up. Yeah. So yes, these these pleasant experiences that we have a shadow that follows them, and that is the shadow of attachment or entanglement. I like to use this word more. Entanglements can quickly come, but at the same time, also the pleasurable experiences themselves, they are not kleshas.
So now let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll continue. So now we continue to verses 36 to 42. So let's read in the different rooms. I will not leave the fight until, before my eyes, these enemies of mine are all destroyed. For if aroused to fury by the merest slight, incapable of sleep until the scores are settled, proud but wretched rivals, destined all to suffer when they die, will draw the battle lines and do their best to win, and careless of the pain of cut and thrust, will stand their ground, refusing to give way. No need to say that I will not lose heart, regardless of the hardships of the fray. From this day forth, I'll strive to crush these foes whose very nature is to bring me pain. The wounds inflicted by the enemy in futile wars are flaunted by the soldier as a prize. So in the high endeavor for so great a thing, why should I be dismayed by hurt or injury? When fishers, butchers, farmers, and the like, intending just to gain their livelihood, will suffer all the miseries of heat and cold, why, for being's happiness, should those like me not bear the same? When I pledge myself to free from their afflictions beings who abide in every region stretching to the limits of the sky, I was myself not free from such defilements. To speak like that, not knowing my capacity, were these not truly but a madman's words? More reason, then, for never drawing back, abandoning the fight against the foul affliction. So this section in Shantideva is encouraging us, to develop the ability, the willingness to endure whatever hardships that might come up in the context of battling, so to say, against the clashes. So the broader context, don't forget, right, of this chapter is an attitude of being careful about the bodhicitta, the mind of awakening that we have given rise, that we have formally committed ourselves to through the ceremony of receiving the bodhicitta vow. So after receiving the bodhicitta vow, now we need to guard this vow like it is a little baby. So in guarding this vow from being harmed, we need to see that what harms this vow, generally speaking, of course, are the afflictive emotions, the kleshas. Then there are kleshas that are more directly are the enemy, so to say, of this vow. The most direct enemy of the bodhicitta vow is attachment to our own well-being, our own welfare, our own pleasure, our own convenience. Attachment to that is at the root of the main enemy to this bodhicitta vow that we have taken. And this attachment or this entanglement with like our own well-being, our own welfare, so this limited, very limited view can get very sophisticated, can come up with very convincing arguments why you should only think of yourself, you should only take care of yourself. It's so sophisticated that it even will kind of infiltrate us without making us feel like we are self-centered. In fact, it will even convince us like, oh, no, it's realistic. It is not self-centered. Whereas it is unrealistic to want to become Buddha for the benefit of all beings. It will say, no, that's just unreasonable. That's unrealistic. That's only for very, 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 very special beings. You should only think about yourself. We can even come up with those, those enemies are even more dangerous because they have a pretense of being reasonable. So in fact, the last verse of this section, 42, right? I'll go there first before we go back to 36. But in 42, right? Shantideva says, and so, without really understanding the implications of what this Bodhisattva vow, this Bodhicitta vow is, I made that promise, He says, to speak like that, not knowing my capacity. Gosh, he says, this must be a madman's, a crazy person's words. But then he says, so the more reason now, don't turn back. Even though what I did, making this bodhicitta vow, now might seem like, a crazy action. He says, but no, now cannot turn back. Even though I crazily made that vow. Now time to fight the kleshas. Time to battle the kleshas. So this is, you hear in Tibetan circles a lot of crazy wisdom, crazy wisdom. This is the kind of crazy wisdom that we should practice. If you want to be a Mahasiddha with crazy wisdom, this is the kind of crazy wisdom, which is that whenever, other people or you yourself, say, now be reasonable, how can you liberate all sentient beings? It's not possible. This is when you have to manifest this kind of crazy wisdom and say, oh yes, yeah, it's impossible. So I'm going to do it. So sometimes I've said, the Bodhisattva vow or the Bodhicitta vow is the vow to do the impossible. Because it is impossible, I will do.
exactly, it's a contradiction in terms. But that is the craziness that we need to have. So in the East Asian Buddhist traditions, like Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, there is a formulation of the Bodhisattva vow in 4 lines. Some people say that this might have originated from Tiantai Zizhe Dashi, this Tiantai master, founder of the Tiantai lineage. Some people say he formulated this, but it's unclear. These 4 lines that says, although sentient beings are limitless, I vow to liberate all of them. Then, although kleshas, afflictive emotions, are inexhaustible, I vow to cut them completely. So those are the first 2 lines. Then the 3rd line, although the Dharma teachings, the Dharma doors, the Dharma methods are limitless, I vow to master all of them. And finally, although Buddhahood is unsurpassed, I vow to reach it. So, you might think, oh, this is just a poetic way of saying things. But actually, I think you can also see how, if I were to summarize this formulation, these 4 lines, it is basically making the vow, making the promise to do the impossible. So this is true crazy wisdom. Crazy wisdom can also be expressed as courageous wisdom. The kind of courage that is not considering common sense. So if we have that kind of courage, if we have that kind of craziness, then whatever hardships that turn up in this task of battling and defeating the kleshas, we will not give up. We will persist. So in this section, 30, starting with 36, Shantideva is saying, you know how sometimes when somebody insults us, somebody slights us, right? And that can keep us up all night, and that we cannot rest until we have settled the score, so to say. In verse 36, he says that. He says, so now that kind of impatience, you should skillfully use that, but instead of using that with regards to ordinary insults, like insults from other people, that you feel that you have been insulted by this or that person, which he says, Shantideva says, those types of insults and those types of injury, they are not worth your time, because they're not really that harmful. But the injury and the insult, the afflictive emotions, keep inflicting on us. He says, you should turn that kind of impatience towards them. I cannot go to sleep. I'm so worked up by this afflictive emotion. So I need to do better, to kick them out, to evict them. So 37, he says, these proud and wretched rivals, they cause all to suffer. Their victims, they cause their victims to suffer when their victims die. That means these kleshas, will cause us to suffer, especially when we die. So here, when we die, right, you should not just think about literally death, oh, you mean these kleshas will harm me only when I die? You say, oh, next life or hell realms. It's no, die simply here means, when things are not under your control anymore. So often, when kleshas are doing the harm on us, and when things are going relatively well, we don't really feel that klesha is such a big problem. But when things start going wrong, i.e., in other words, when we die, when things are no longer under our control, so easy control, when things are not going our way, oh, wow. Then all the harms of the kleshas become very obvious. Then at that time, we start panicking. We start regretting. Then some of us even give up completely practicing Dharma. When we are sad, we throw Dharma away. I've seen many cases like this. We become so discouraged, we even throw Dharma away. We don't want to listen to teachings. We don't want to do practice. And if that happens, and that happens very often, I think, and if that happens, we should really look and see, what is my relationship with the Dharma? What is it? Is it something that, again, on good days, I like the image of being, Buddhist. Then on suffering days, right when we need the medicine, we throw out the medicine. We run away from the hospital. We don't want to show our faces to the doctors and the nurses. Then we know, that means until now, our Dharma practice is about maintaining an appearance and image, not really about getting well. Then this is not going to work. So these clashes, they will draw the battle lines. They will do their best to win. And they are not afraid of pain. They are not afraid. They won't, give up so easily. They will stand their ground, because they have to defend their right to occupy your heart, their right to occupy your mind, their right to take up real estate, precious space in your heart. So if they're like that, Shantideva says, then in 38, he says, then no need to say, I, cannot lose heart. So this is about courage. I cannot lose heart, regardless of the hardships. So a willingness to stick with, to not be disappointed, discouraged, intimidated by hardships. From this day on, I will strive to crush, he says, these clashes, whose very nature is to cause me pain and harm. I will crush them. I will destroy them. 38 and 39, Shantideva will say, if you look around, if you look around, if you look at ordinary soldiers or fighters, they're so proud, if they have like sustained injury. They will have the scars, on their face, on their hand, as if it's a medal of honor. So these ordinary warriors, soldiers, kind of like in the line of duty, they have sustained injuries. So they kind of sort of proudly, he says, show them. Then moreover, verse 40, he says, fishermen, butchers, farmers, all these people, just for the sake of livelihood, for their ordinary mundane well-being, they go through the miseries of heat and cold. They work so hard, often just for very limited good. And so what about what we are saying that we will do with the Bodhicitta vow, which is the welfare of all sentient beings? How can we, right, be so timid? How can we lack courage? He says, no, we need to have great courage, basically. In chapter 6, the chapter on patience or endurance, Shantideva is going to elaborate more on this, the need for us to develop great courage. He talks about, he says, look at those who worship these worldly gods. In India, there are some forms of spiritual practice where to please the gods or the goddesses, people would cut themselves to bleed, will like whip themselves, would do all kinds of like things to inflict pain upon their own body in order to kind of please the gods and the goddesses. So he says, if those people are capable of doing that for the purpose of pleasing these gods and goddesses, those of us who have taken the Bodhicitta vow, how can we, do any less than that? He's not saying, to fulfill Bodhicitta vow, you have to whip yourself, you have to cut yourself. He's not saying that. But he's saying, we need to develop courage. Yeah, in Dharma practice, you don't go creating suffering to torture your body or to torture your mind. No. And so we don't do this kind of asceticism, so to say, right? But what we do and what we all have to do is to be willing to not give up, to endure hardships as they arise, especially in relation to this work of defeating the kleshas.
So then verse 41, 42, again, this is the one that I say, this is like the crazy wisdom, so-called. So 41, he says, when I pledge, meaning when I made that bodhicitta vow, that bodhisattva vow, to free all beings from their kleshas, all beings, no matter where they are, no matter how many of them there are, at that time, I myself is far from, being free from these kleshas. But yet, crazily, I thought, that, oh, I should free all beings from their kleshas. So he, again, emphasizing this point, from one perspective, it was so absurd. But then here, basically he's saying, but in this case, do trust that craziness. Do trust, that kind of impulsive generating of bodhicitta. He does not explicitly say it here, but we understand, this seemingly impulsive act of making this outrageous, this crazy commitment to become Buddha for the benefit of beings, even though it seems so crazy, so unreasonable, it comes from our nature, our Buddha nature. Yes, because it's authentically what we actually are. And so it's that spark, so to say, it's that core that created this craziness of taking this bodhicitta vow. Trust that.
And 41 and 42 is also making the point that in order to benefit beings, right now, for us, the best thing that we can do is to defeat our own kleshas. Right now, the best thing to do is to defeat or at least weaken our own kleshas. Sometimes, the idea of becoming a bodhisattva, taking the bodhisattva vow, can turn into poison. Like, I want to benefit beings. I want to help all beings. So then we get so busy, looking great, like putting on your Buddhist Superman suit, and walking around town, you know, at the Dharma Center, putting, you know, wearing your Superman suit, you know, then you forget, you know, how ridiculous actually the Superman suit looks like, you know. Hey, hello, your underwear you're wearing outside. So it's easy, you know, to get carried away by these kinds of egocentric magnifying the self. So Shantideva says, you know, the first step to benefiting beings is defeating, weakening your own kleshas. So let's now read next section, 43 to the end, to 48. This shall be my all-consuming passion. Filled with rancor, I will wage my war. Defilement of this kind will halt defilement, and for this reason it shall not be spurned. Better if I perish in the fire, better that my head be severed from my body, than ever I should serve or reverence my mortal enemies' defiled emotions. Common foes, when driven from the state, retreat and base themselves in other lands, and muster all their strength, the better to return. But enemy afflictions are without such stratagems. Miserable defilements scattered by the eye of wisdom. Where will you now run when driven from my mind? Whence would you return to do me harm? But oh, my mind is feeble, I am indolent. Defilements are not in the object, nor within the faculties, nor somewhere in between. And if not elsewhere, where is their abode? Whence they afflict their havoc on the world? They are simple mirages, and so take heart. Banish all your fear and strive to know their nature. Why suffer needlessly the pains of hell? This is how I should reflect and labor, that I might apply the precepts thus set forth. What invalids in need of medicine ignore their doctor's words and gain their health? So verse 43, he says, now he says, let's use defilement to overcome the greater defilement. The small defilement, which is the impatience that we normally show towards things that are acting against our interests. So our ordinary ideas of enemies. Sometimes we think our neighbor is our enemy. Sometimes we think our boss is our enemy. Sometimes we even think our partner is our enemy. Sometimes we think the government is our enemy. So all those ideas, you know, he says, now turn that kind of impatience, that kind of wanting to kill off the enemy, turn it so that it is directed against the greater enemy, which is the kleshas. Now, of course, before Buddhahood is achieved, even this kind of defilement needs to be purified. Even this lesser defilement used in a skillful way to overcome the greater defilement, this lesser defilement also needs to be purified. More specifically, they say, in the commentaries, they say, from the 8th bhumi for bodhisattvas onwards, is to purify these more subtle defilements. Subtle defilements that at earlier stages of the path could be skillfully kind of, you can say, recruited or redirected to overcome the grosser, bigger defilements. So then at the end, from 8, 9, 10 bhumis, what is being purified there is the more subtle defilements, such as this one here. And so 44, it says, it's better that I perish in the fire. It's better that my head is cut off than I should ever serve the kleshas. It's like a warrior-like courage. So sometimes you might hear, like bodhisattvas are like warriors. They are like heroes. In Tibetans, Changchup, Sempa. Sempa, Changchup is Bodhi. Bodhi, awakening. Sempa is explained as, sometimes literally, Sempa is being, but Sempa can also mean like warrior or hero. So the heroes that is awake. So the heroes of what? The warriors that fight against what? Fight against the sleep of delusion and confusion. And so when these like great bodhisattvas or tantric deities are shown, with sword and knives and weapons, we should not for even one moment think, that these beings actually walk around with weapons. This is to wrongly practice idam. Wrong idam practice is to take on the literal level, these Buddhas walk around with weapons. These, what's shown in Thangka paintings, in statues, these are symbols. So Bodhisattva Manjushri's sword is the wisdom that cuts all enemies of afflictive emotions. And then 45, he says, Shantideva says, with common enemies, if you defeat them, they run away. Maybe like two countries fighting, sharing a border. So you defeat them, they run back to their country. And then over time, they'll build up, stronger, and they come attack you again. However, he says, this is not how it is with kleshas. If you're able to destroy the kleshas, then they are pretty powerless at that point. They don't come back. If you're able to destroy the kleshas. They're not so clever, he says. Verses 46 to 47, Shantideva gives a preview of the teachings on wisdom. As much as this whole chapter emphasizes the dangers and the harm of the kleshas, now 46 and 47, he says, actually, even these kleshas, they don't have any essence to them. They are temporary. They are not real. And so, as much as I have emphasized, as in Shantideva, has emphasized, you don't underestimate them. You don't become kind of careless with them and all of that. As much as that is what's emphasized in this chapter, but in the end, we should always understand too, that actually the kleshas they are mistakes. And mistakes are ultimately no basis to persist. So if we have the wisdom eye to see them, to see their true nature, then it's actually not that hard to be free from them. So to briefly illustrate this point, in 47, Shantideva says, so let's look at, briefly these defilements. He says, where are they exactly? They are not in the object. Meaning, when we see something, we hear something, we smell something, we say, oh, that is so nice. Oh, that is so good. Or we say, oh, that is terrible. Oh, that I don't like. He says, but these kleshas, are they coming from the things that we perceive? He says, no, they are not there. So if the klesha of attachment or aversion is in the object, then no matter who encounters the object, they will have the same kleshas coming into operation. But that's clearly not the case. So think about a politician, you know. If the klesha is inside that object, then no matter who, look at this politician, they will have the same result. But no, some people hate, some people love. So the klesha is not in the object. Then is it in the faculties? Is it in the perception itself? In my eye, in my ear, in my nose? It says also not there. The kleshas, they're not there. So between, you know, here doing the perceiving, there what is perceived, maybe the klesha is somewhere in between. That they turn up somewhere in between. It says no, it's also not there. In one famous sutra in East Asia called the Shurangama Sutra, there the Buddha and Ananda has this conversation about where exactly is it going on? Kleshas, where do they arise? You know, and also mind, where does it arise? Inside, outside, in between. You know, so there I think like seven possibilities are discussed and also shown by the Buddha to be not the case. So then what this is teaching us, what this is pointing out is they do not have any particular place where they exist because they are mirages. They are illusorily produced temporary experiences that will dissolve once those causes and conditions to produce the rainbow, to produce the mirage has dissipated. So in that sense, right, these kleshas, no matter how much pain and suffering that they can create for us, from the Buddha perspective, you know, from the perspective of seeing clearly, they're also pretty powerless. That's 47. So 47, he says, you know, so don't fear them. Instead, strive to know their nature. Develop clear seeing. So sometimes skillfully fear kleshas, sometimes fearlessly face kleshas. The work of overcoming kleshas and achieving state of Buddha is not something that you do with only one method, but 84,000 is what we need. But don't relate to the 84,000 as 84,000 choices, but rather the 84,000 are 84,000 forming a complete holistic approach to awakening. So the first two lines of 48 says, in English here, it says, this is how I should reflect and labor. So this is how I should look at things, and this is how I should behave, I should cultivate, that I might apply the precepts thus set forth, meaning that I might apply the 84,000 dharmas. The last two lines for 48, kind of ironically, he says, when have you ever heard, of a sick person who by ignoring, the doctor's advice, they got well? He says, no, not possible. So likewise, if we want to get well, if we want to be free from confusion, from suffering, then we have to apply the Dharma. That is the only way. So with this, we have finished chapter 4, the chapter on carefulness. Carefulness in relation especially to the bodhicitta vow that we have taken in chapter 3. How to protect that from being harmed. Yeah. Chapter 5 is about the mindset that we need to have, the mindset that you should cultivate in order to be able to keep disciplined conduct, shila, in a more helpful way, in a more perfect way. Shila or disciplined conduct is the second of the 6 paramitas. Since Shantideva's audience are these monks at Nalanda, so they know, or at least they should know very well the kind of details of the disciplined conduct that they keep. Yeah? And so Shantideva doesn't discuss those details, like do this, don't do this, this you're allowed, this you're not allowed. He doesn't discuss that. Instead, in chapter 5, he gives the mindset, the mental skill, the hard skills that we need to develop in order to be able to keep the do's and the don'ts in a more natural way, in a more not forced, in a way that is not forced, in a way that really truly arises from the heart. We will start chapter 5 on Saturday. And then, so those of you who are connected to Jigong Kagyu, maybe you already know, but a reminder that tonight, or for those of you in Asia, tomorrow morning, but for those of us in the Western Hemisphere, tonight, 10 p.m. New York time, 10 p.m. New York time, is the global celebration of the two things. One is marking the day that Buddha Shakyamuni gave the first teaching to the 5 monks. So it's the turning of the wheel of Dharma Day, where he taught the 4 Noble Truths to the 5 monks. So that's the kind of the bigger kind of significance of that. So His Holiness the Drigong Kyabga will give the transmission of the Shakyamuni practice that he wrote, and which we practice, some of us practice as a group for Vesak last year. Then secondly, it also coincides with His Holiness's birthday. So we are also going to do that. And so there's a Zoom information. So if anybody has that information, you can share it on the chat, in the Zoom chat. Otherwise, on Facebook, I'm sure you all can get that information too. Changju sem chorin poche ma ge ba nam ge gyurchi ge ba nyam pa me pa ya gong ne gong du be war shou. Also quickly, I want to thank especially those of you who have from time to time sent donations to me for this series. I really appreciate that. I don't do any of the Dharma activities with any prize or anything like that. The Dharma Center doesn't pay me either. And so this is helpful
with the dana. But I apologize for not being able to respond to everyone and to say thank you. But I know the Drigong Dharmakirti team, if you send the dana through the Drigong Dharmakirti, then they are very good at sending a thank you to you guys. But if it came directly to me, I'm terrible. I don't know what to say, right? So apologies. Thank you and apologies at the same time. As St. Paul says in the Bible, he says sometimes, you know, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak, you know. So the spirit is, you know, yes, I thank all of you, but the body in this case is not weak, it's lazy, you know, not like sending thank you to everyone one by one. Yes, no password required for the His Holiness's and event. No password, just that. So, okay. Bye-bye, Tata. And thank you to waiting. Thank you to Antonio for translating. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.